Referred. The crying started at exactly 7:14 a.m. What the Husky did next was something the gas technician said he'd seen documented once in 22 years on the job. Finn had always talked. That was the thing about Huskies. They had opinions and they stated them, and the Caldwell family had spent 3 years learning to read the difference between Finn's "I want to go outside" sound and his "there is a squirrel on the fence" sound, and his "someone is at the door" sound. They knew his voice the way you know a language. They were fluent, which is why what happened on the morning of October 9th was so disorienting. Because what Finn did was not a sound they had ever heard. It was not in the dictionary they had built together over 3 years. Owen was 6 months old, and he woke at 7:14, crying with the particular insistence of a baby who had decided morning was happening, and no one had been informed. Elena Caldwell came in from the kitchen, picked him up, held him against her shoulder. He kept crying. She walked the room. Finn came to the doorway, which was normal. He always came to check on Owen in the mornings. He stood in the doorway for 4 seconds. Then he did something that was not normal at all. He turned around, went to the kitchen, pressed his nose to the back panel of the stove for a long count. Then he did something Elena had never seen. He sat in front of the stove, facing her, and opened his mouth and made no sound. Not a bark. Not a howl. His mouth simply opened, wide, like a yawn but slower, and he looked directly at her and waited. She said his name. He closed his mouth, opened it again, kept his eyes on her. She thought, he wants breakfast. This is his breakfast face. She walked to the cabinet and reached for his bowl. He didn't move. He didn't look at the bowl. He kept his eyes on her face and opened his mouth again. Owen cried harder. Elena went back to the baby. Finn left the kitchen and went to the front door and sat there, then returned to the stove, then the front door, then the stove. A circuit, deliberate, unhurried, insistent. Her husband, Thomas, came downstairs. What is he doing? Elena shook her head. I don't know. I've never seen this. Thomas watched Finn pace the circuit twice. He doesn't want to go out. He keeps coming back to the stove. Probably smells something you cooked. He's food motivated. Thomas was a software engineer. He was precise, methodical, excellent at finding the logical explanation. He found one. They both accepted it. Inferred Finn did the circuit again. Stove. Door. Stove. Owen wailed against Elena's shoulder. Finn stopped at the stove, pressed his nose to the back panel, and stayed there for 20 seconds, not moving, face pressed to the metal, inhaling. Thomas, Elena said quietly. He looked. There was something about the stillness of the dog in that moment, the completeness of his attention to that panel. Thomas said later that he didn't know why he did it. It wasn't logical. He didn't smell anything. Owen was screaming, and it was a normal Tuesday morning, and there was no reason to call anyone. But he picked up his phone and called the gas company. The technician arrived 40 minutes later. He had his detector unit in his hand before he crossed the threshold. Elena was still holding Owen, still walking the room, and the technician came through the front door and stopped. 3 steps inside and looked at his sensor and said very calmly, "Please take the baby and the dog and step outside right now." The fitting on the rear connector of the gas range had developed a microfracture. The technician used the word micro. He also used the words "you were very fortunate." The concentration in the kitchen had not reached ignition threshold. It was close. He stood in the driveway afterward with his clipboard and looked at Finn sitting beside Elena on the front step and said, "I've been doing this 22 years. Referred, I've seen 2 cases documented where a dog identified a natural gas leak before any human or detector." He paused. Make that 3. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Natural gas contains mercaptan, the sulfur compound added specifically so humans can smell it. In very low concentrations at the earliest stages of a microfracture leak, the scent is below human detection threshold. A dog's olfactory system, with 300 million scent receptors against a human's 6 million, registers those concentrations thousands of times earlier. Finn had been at the stove since Owen's first cry. The vibration of the baby's wail had increased his arousal, directed his attention, made him map the room. He found what was in the air behind the stove panel. Then he spent 45 minutes trying to show them what he'd found, using the only tools he had. His body and the front door, the universal signal for outside. The place where the air was clean. They had read it as food motivation. They had read it as a morning routine. They had read everything except what it was. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. referred the range was replaced that afternoon. They did not use the stove for 3 days. On the fourth morning, Elena made coffee, and Finn came to the kitchen and went through his regular morning routine. Bowl, window, return to Owen's bouncy seat, chin on the floor beside it. Normal, his dictionary of sounds was back to the one they knew. But Elena had added a new entry to it. She had learned finally to listen for the page she hadn't known existed. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never ask for anything in return. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. Owen is 8 months old now. When he cries in the morning, Finn comes to the doorway and checks him and returns to the kitchen. The same circuit, and Elena watches him do it and understands now what he is doing. He is mapping the room. He is reading the air. He is telling her, every morning, with the silence of an animal whose job is simply to know the air is clean today. Everything is fine. I already checked.